Welcome to Prison Professors. I am Michael Santos, and it is so exciting for me every opportunity I have to present a new masterclass. And on these masterclass, it's an extension of our preliminary course called Preparing for Success After Prison, which I hope you've gone through. It's in every federal prison. It's in hundreds of state prisons. It's free. And we are using this as part of our advocacy to try and introduce work release programs and furloughs and home confinement. But we can't work it without you working. And that's why I'm always reaching out to leaders in society, masters who present these master classes and help us understand how they became successful. And today we get to introduce you to Renee. Now, I've asked Renee, she's a leader in business and a leader in her community. I'm not going to give her last name. I'm not going to give the name of her company because, after all, we are going inside of prisons and I want to respect her privacy. But we're going to hear an inspiring story about somebody who's not only known how to go out and build a successful career, but also somebody who's known how to overcome enormous crisis in her personal life. Renee, thank you so much for being a part of the Prison Professors program. You could be really helpful to our audience right now if you just told them a little bit about the career you're leading right now and how the main areas, the high points of your career.
So basically, I work in a laboratory, owned a laboratory for many years, and I am the technical nerd side of it. I keep the instruments going, I validate the instruments, I write code for the instruments, make sure the instruments are operating to guidelines. I follow all the guidelines with CLIA and COLA and all the governmental regulatory boards to make sure that the best patient care and outcomes are provided for every sample that comes in. And that's kind of what I do.
So the people in our audience will not understand, of course, anything but COLA, including me. But what I do understand is that in order to be the technical nerd side of a company, you very likely have achieved a level of financial success and stability. Could you give us an idea of the amount of revenues or so on that your role, what is under your purview? How important is this job?
So basically, are you asking kind of like what our company, like the revenues for our
Yeah,
company?
I want our audience to see, because one of the things that we try and help our audience understand is that people who achieve a high level of financial success or who achieve a high level of influence in a company, it's because they've worked really hard preparing. This course is about helping people prepare for success when they've been going through a crisis. And you are at a high level of success. I know that. I want our audience to get the sense of their teacher and what level you've been at, so that they can say, oh wow, I could really learn from her.
Of course, I mean, when we first started our company, we went through a period of almost 2 years, year and a half, where we didn't make anything. We were barely even, we were breaking even, and we were happy with breaking even. And then we really put it into gear and did some right things. And we ended the company at it was about $1.5 to $2 million a month.
So that's the kind of numbers that I try to get people to understand. When you take an idea into something that becomes a reality, that doesn't happen by accident. That happens with a laid out plan. And that's what we're going to go into in our course today, is helping people understand how to lay out a plan that will not only help you celebrate breaking even, but have a pathway to growth and to achieving something that you could provide jobs for many people and pay taxes and build something of meaning and relevance and give you a sense of fulfillment. But I know that didn't happen by accident, Renee, and I know that from talking with you previously. Why don't you tell our audience about where you grew up and what kind of, tell us about your commitment to, nobody gets into just saying, I'm starting and running a lab and I'm a lab nerd. I know that took a lot of prep. What was your childhood like, and what influenced you to want to pursue this kind of a role?
So I grew up in El Paso, Texas, and I grew up on the east side, which is not the greatest side. My family struggled a lot as I was younger. There were some sacrifices that were made because they didn't want me to go to public school. my entire family sacrificed to get me into a Catholic all-girls school.
From what
And
age?
I was there from kindergarten, so about 5, until junior high, so 8th grade.
And
And
did
I
you
was on scholarship.
appreciate that as that when you were a child that you were in this type of thing, or is that something you can reflect on now and you could see how that influenced your upbringing?
I did not appreciate it at all. I
You
actually
didn't
just
like the ruler getting smacked on your hands because I got that a lot. I was in Catholic
um
school too.
okay, I still have the scar from that actually happening. But my part of it was I went to a really affluent school with a bunch of, kids of really prominent members of the community. And I was there on scholarship. So I was there in the lunchroom cleaning up after people for lunch. I would have, that was my after lunch class, even as early as, second and third grade. I was cleaning up the chalkboards, because back then it was chalkboards. We didn't have whiteboards. It'd make it so much easier now, but I was cleaning up chalkboards. I would have to go and like clean all the erasers in this big machine. And I would get made fun of all of the time because I was one of the handful of kids on scholarship. So at the time, I thought of it as being terrible. But now looking back, it really laid the groundwork for my ultimate success because I learned so many skills through that hard work, even at an early age when I didn't want to do it.
Yeah, and that's one of the great things about being in prison for our people who are watching this is you get to have really a master's degree in rejection and in being put down and in being told no. But look at what Renee says. Now that she's achieved a high level of success, she could recognize that experience really conditions us to deal with crisis and to deal with struggle and to figure out ways to overcome. You said that your family didn't come from an area of prominence. What did your family do? Were they educated people or were they workers? Or walk us through the influences around you at that time.
No, my family, it doesn't have a high level of education at all. My grandfather was just enlisted in the Army. That's how we were able to move out here. Originally, our family was from Puerto Rico. Back then, the Army needed people to enroll and enlist. So they offered, people citizenship before Puerto Rico was technically part of the US. So he came over here on that. And even being in the military, you don't make a lot of money. You do struggle, especially if you have a family. And back then, you couldn't live on base. There were some different. It's not like it is now. And so we did really struggle. My mom was really young when she had me. My dad was also really young. Senior year of high school is kind of when I decided to make my appearance. And my grandparents had to really step up on their, lower income. My grandma was an ESL teacher for first graders to teach English as a second language because of the area that we lived in. And yeah, so it was great.
And so you said that you started in as a kindergarten or first grader in Catholic school, and did you stay there all the way through high school?
I stayed there until 8th grade, and then in 8th grade, my mom moved to Phoenix, and so that's why I came out here. And then starting in high school, my freshman year, I went to a public school, which started a lot of balls in motion in a different way.
Uh huh. And
So there were boys, there were no rules, there was no nuns,
no
there
dress
was
code.
every day, no dress codes. I had to figure out what I had to wear every day. Just much different. And for a teenager kind of coming and trying to figure out how to come into themselves and then getting thrown into a completely different area, um, it was it was a little bit tough.
Renee, did you have an idea of what you wanted to do? So you'd been around lower income era. You were exposed to affluence around you. At what age did you start seeing yourself as being something more than living on the margins and finding a pathway. How old were you when you had that idea?
I was young. I was probably between 10 and 12 years old. Um, and I know this is going to sound so stupid, but even at lunch, in the lunchroom with all the other girls that were there, my lunch was always different. Like their lunches, they had these huge lunches and all of this. I came with my literally mayonnaise sandwich. That's all I had. Mayonnaise in between two pieces of bread. That's all that I had, unless I had to eat the school lunch, which I'd rather my mayonnaise sandwich, to be honest with you. Um, but like seeing that and seeing how people didn't struggle, my shoes, I had Keds. It was back when Keds were popular. I mean, literally, my grandma had to glue the soles of my shoes back on, and everybody would make fun of me. Like when I would run in PE, like they would always keep coming off, and she would have to still be gluing them back together. Those types of things, and seeing that and seeing how it was not necessarily the norm and what I was exposed to at school, seeing those things really opened my eyes. And I'm like, you know what? I have to be the one to pull my family out of this. I have to get us set up to not struggle the way that we are.
So even as a young child, you had this sense of wanting to not only pick yourself up, but pick up your family as well.
Yes.
And that's inspiring to us as well. We want people to see that it's not, life isn't only about what we're going through, but making sure that we're making life better for the people we love and care about. And did you have an idea of how you would do that? I mean, I know you started at 12, but at some point in time, you probably started thinking about college and tying the relationship to education and learning and earning. Did
Mhm.
that happen in high school or in junior high?
It happened in junior high. I had one of the sisters that was there, really got me in heavily into science, and biology. And I knew at that point that I wanted to pursue a degree in medicine, because it fulfilled all of the different things that were important to me. I was able to earn a good living, a reputable living, and I was also able to help others. And that's a big thing for me, is making sure not only my family and myself, but also other people are able to, that I'm able to help and to give back. Just coming from the situation that I did, it's not just, you realize it's not just about you, it's about the community as a whole.
And so, what kind of student were you? Given that you knew that what you wanted to do, were you the student that was earning, great grades and participating in extracurricular things? Help us understand how you prepared.
So I was always really good in school. I earned very high marks in school, but it was a lot of work. I didn't always go out to play with my friends, even when they would come over. I stayed late at the school researching things in the library. I learned about things outside of my coursework, than what was just assigned. I really took the initiative to absorb as much information as I could. I remember my grandfather, for one of my birthdays, he bought me an entire set of Encyclopedia Britannicas. And literally, I started at the A's and just started reading encyclopedias. Because, like I said, back then it was a little different. There wasn't internet, there wasn't, those things. Really taking that initiative to really just try to learn and absorb as much as I could about the world, because I wasn't traveling, I wasn't leaving my community. We didn't have those types of resources. So my only exposure to everything else that was out there is kind of what I would read in books. So it was a lot of reading, a lot of taking the initiative, and making sure that if I had one particular assignment, how could I take that assignment and go above and beyond? Even as a kid, I would sit there and I would have my notes and I would write down, okay, this is what the project is. This is what the assignment is. This is what I'm going to do, and literally lay out my exact plan for the project. Um, and so that kind of laid the foundation for me to be successful later on, because I implemented that organizational structure, which obviously I fine tuned and grew over time, but I used that same mindset in how I approach different adversities.
So there's a lot of big takeaways in all this, and we've gotten through in the first quarter of this course is the preparation that it takes to succeed. It's the same. What we're hearing from Renee is the same thing that we teach in our introductory course, Preparing for Success After Prison. You've got to be able to. I know that when I was in prison, I learned from people like Renee. I'd sit in that prison cell with 26 years to serve, and I'd say, I hate being in prison. I hate it. I want to have something better. That's no different from Renee being a 12-year-old or a 10-year-old and saying, I don't really like being from the east side of El Paso. I really like those other kids who get to eat what they want, and they don't have to have their shoes glued together. They have more things. And so she said, but she didn't just dream about it. She did something about it. She focused on learning. And had I been in prison, I would realize, wow, I have to learn. I have to find a way to train myself, because wanting a better life is not the same thing as getting a better life. You've got to put the work in on yourself. And that strategy, for me, it helped me develop confidence and helped me realize I'm not completely dependent on what the prison system does. I can figure out things on my own to develop my vocabulary, to develop the way that I think, to prepare. Notice what she said about understanding the assignment and then going the depths and writing it out to make sure, okay, this is the goal of the assignment. I'm going to carry it through. And I think that's a pattern we've heard from all masters. That's why I asked Renee to be a master class. And I'm just so grateful to you, Renee, for taking the time to share that with our audience. Could you tell us about your pursuit of this career? You said medical school was important to you.
Yes.
Where did you decide to go to school, and after high school, and what efforts did you make to get into those kinds of schools that would expose you to medical science?
Yeah, so I basically went to community college. I decided that, a university was not the best fit for me at the time that I was at in my life. High school really set a different set of balls in motion. Coming into public school, by the time my freshman year was up, I was already in advanced calculus. I was already in advanced, English. I was done taking all the courses that a public school offered by my freshman year, which led to taking culinary classes, which are great. Don't get mistaken, and pottery and different things. So I had to fill my days with electives. I got really bored really easily, and I made some decisions that might not have been the best. So when I graduated high school, I decided to kind of take a step back for myself and go to community college. I changed my major so many times. I have an associate's degree in computer engineering as well. That was the first thing I did. I have another associate's degree in interior design. I really wanted to just gain as much knowledge as I could. And, I also saw, like, in computer science, I didn't like it. There were different things with that. And I felt like it was a failure, even though people would look at it as such an accomplishment. Oh, she got her associate's degree. I was like, I failed. I'm doing something that I don't want to do, that I'm not passionate about, that it was just came easy to me. So I figured I'll just take this easy way out. And it was not great. Interior design, same thing. I saw some people that were doing really well. And I found out that interior design was not for me. Also looked at that as a failure. So I stopped school for some time. And then, my stepdad was diagnosed with cancer. And, I had my daughter already at this time. And he said, you have to go back to school. Like, promise me you're going to go back to school and you're going to do what you want to do, what you've always wanted to do, and get into medicine. And I'm like, okay, I'm promising. And I didn't break that promise. I stayed true, and I ended up finding a Christian university at Grand Canyon. I went there, and they really, really helped. They really helped me get to where I wanted to be, and that was super important to me.
And so, what was your undergraduate? That was to go get a bachelor's degree, I take it.
That was for my bachelor's degree. So my undergrad, I have an undergrad in computer engineering, an undergrad in interior design, an undergrad in mathematics and chemistry, and then my bachelor's is in biology pre-med.
And how did you? Wow, that's a lot of education. How did you perform at that level once you got into the canyon? What did you call the college?
Grand Canyon.
Grand Grand Canyon. Is that a university?
It is,
So
yes.
Grand Canyon University. You got in there. How did you perform there? Did you perform as well as you did in high school?
I did not
Okay.
not
So
perform as well as I did in high
so it
school,
was
and
a challenge.
it was a challenge. And it was something that I went into it expecting to be easy, like it always has been, and it wasn't. I had to really realign and refocus all of my priorities and my wants and desires and my goals the minute that I got my first set of grades. I really had to realign things and look at my life at that point, because I'm like, how is this not possible? I've always been so good at school, and now I'm getting, I got C's and D's. Where is this even coming from? But I also had to take a step back and understand, I was a single mom.
Hmm.
I was trying to do my best as I could, and try to not let that frustrate me or deter me from my goal, but use it as a springboard to help propel me to the next step. Use it as motivation, rather than the negativity just consuming you and thinking, I can't do this. This is absolutely horrible. I don't know what's wrong. Kind of accepting that, and then go back to the basics. Like set my goals, organize how I'm going to achieve that, and have just a roadmap for my education. And that's what I didn't do when I went to Grand Canyon. I didn't set my roadmap. I didn't set my clear goals. I was just kind of flying blind. And for me, I really need that organization, even if it's a whiteboard, in my bedroom with, these are the things I'm going to accomplish for the day, or at the end of the semester, this is what I want to accomplish. And then I also had to separate out school and then being a mother, because I had two roles. I had a role to try to get our family out of where it was at. And then I also had a goal and a role of being a mom and making sure that I was present, because that was also very important to me, to make sure that I was raising my daughter, and that, that I was there for her.
Did you also have a need to work while you were going through this preparatory stage? Did you have jobs?
I did. I had a bunch of jobs. I was head of cosmetics at Walgreens. Um, and I basically, a glorified cashier there. I worked at Kmart also as a cashier. Um, I worked just kind of any, odd jobs that I could potentially get. I've done everything from washing dishes for, cash under the table, to I was later on, I was able to get promoted at Walgreens to a pharmacy technician. They helped provide some training and whatnot, so that was fantastic. I was glad that I was able to grow from cosmetics into the pharmacy. But that also took work. That also took a goal of saying, when I went to Walgreens to apply, I thought, I'm going to go and work in their pharmacy. That's what I'm going to do. And when I was offered the position, they offered me in cosmetics, and I'm like, no, that's not what I want. But I'm like, no, this is part of the plan. I'm at least going to get my foot in the door, and then I will have to do the work to prove myself and why they should promote me over to the pharmacy. But I worked a lot of different odds and end jobs. There was babysitting, dog sitting. I actually worked at a soup kitchen, which I didn't even realize at the time that it's not always just volunteers. Like, they do actually employ some people as well in the community. There was a lot of different things that I did that I didn't necessarily plan on doing, but it all helped shape the outcome.
And these are very important lessons for people in prison, because when incarcerated, sometimes we say, I don't want to do this job or do that job. I don't want to participate in this class or that class. But what I'm learning from a master is they can see the end game, and they can recognize that success as this series of micro steps. And I heard her say, I was a glorified cash register when she was head of cosmetics at Walgreens. But remember what Walgreens is it's a pharmacy. It's also a drugstore. And if she has aspirations of reaching in that goal, she could surround herself with people in that space and understand I've got to take little steps, always getting closer. While I was in prison, I had to get inspired by people like Renee because it just seems like there's so much that I cannot control. I cannot control what a judge sentenced me to. I cannot control whether the administrators are going to open programs. I cannot control whether they're going to give me books. That's why we create these courses so that you could go through your own lessons. And Renee has been so generous as a volunteer with our nonprofit to not only share her story, but to work with me, as you'll see in the detailed lesson plan that we really hope you will work through to start building a pathway to your success. So eventually, Renee, you graduated, and tell us about the development of your career now, how you go from getting your undergraduate degree or numerous undergraduate degrees and start building the career. How does that path look for you?
So when I graduated, I had every intent to go to medical school. I was applying for different medical schools. And then in all of that and doing a ton of research, I realized how much time away that would take from my daughter. And so I really had to kind of dig deep and find out, what is going to long-term be the best for me. And I know that sounds selfish, but I think at some points you have to put yourself first. And for me, being a mom was my number one. I was trying to do better to get our family out of the rut that it was in and to propel our family into, something different. But the whole driving force behind that was so that my daughter could have a better life, so my family could have a better life than what we had. And I don't want to say better. I want to say different, because it's not necessarily better. It's just different. Because we had some great times. I mean, when I wasn't able to, afford much food, I mean, our electricity had been shut off in our house. So we didn't have a microwave. We couldn't make anything, literally. I mean, and this will sound gross to some people, but literally we opened cans of Chef Boyardee. I gave her a fork and we sat there and just in the darkness and we just ate our Chef Boyardee, laughing, having a great time. And still to this day, she remembers that as a positive, not, the negative that I thought it was. It was one of her moments that was like, wow, my mom is really trying her best and being positive, right? But, after, so I decided to focus on being a mom. So I needed to realign all of my goals that I had set in motion at an earlier stage. So I, realigned all my goals, figured out, well, what can I do with this degree? I have a pre-med degree and I'm not going to medical school. What do you do with that? So I started researching. I started using LinkedIn actually to reach out to some, medical recruiters, seeing what I could do, if there was anything with my background that I could apply for. And then someone had responded that there was a position in, customer service at a new laboratory. And I'm like, okay, let's do this. Let's do this and see what this is going to lead to.
Well, let me say something about that specific area, because you're talking about something that I really try to impress upon people in prison. And that is to understand the relationship between letting the world know how hard we work, what our skills are, what values we bring to the table. And I just heard Renee talk about LinkedIn. For those of you who've been in prison for a long time, you may not know, or those who have not been in the economic workforce, you may not know the relevance of LinkedIn. But it's a place that all businesses review when they're looking for more people. And people have to show, what is your skill set? In what ways have you prepared to bring value to my company? Renee just told us that she was on LinkedIn and somebody found her and a job opportunity. And we're going to hear about that job opportunity. But this isn't only about Renee, and it's certainly not about me or prison professors. It's about you and saying, well, how could I use that while I'm in prison? That's why we built our nonprofit, built Prison Professors Talent, is it creates an opportunity for you to document and memorialize the ways that you are preparing for success. So when you go through Renee's course, you could be memorializing that on Prison Professor's talent, and you could use that to advance your pathway to a job. And simultaneously, our advocacy group can use your story to advocate on why we need work release programs. I'd love to say, oh, look at all the courses that that Linda went through that shows she doesn't want to be a criminal. She wants to be a successful citizen. That is how we change laws. That is how we change advocacy. It happens through this collaboration with people, just like businesses. Hey, we need to get more successful. We need to find people like Renee, and that's what happened for her. So I'm really grateful that you're sharing this story with us, because that particular nugget is exactly what people need to hear. They need to hear, hey, it's not Michael Santos just always telling me to work harder, work harder, work harder. We're hearing from somebody who became really successful, and she's using these same strategies that we teach in our introductory courses and in all the other assets we create to help justice impacted people. So thank you for letting me give them that little monologue there and push for people to document their journey. But please tell us a little bit more about this pathway when this group reached out to you and offered you an opportunity just to have a conversation, if you're starting with a conversation.
Yeah, so they reached out to me on LinkedIn, and they saw my resume with my background, being heavy in science, and they thought that I could really do good things as a customer service rep and supporting a sales rep. Some of the sales reps may not have the best technical background. They're really good at selling, really good about being out in front of people, but they don't always have all the basis of, what some of the doctors would want to hear. And what drives the doctors and patient care and that. So I had the interviews. I'd never really interviewed formally like that in my life. I literally showed up in this interview in a pair of like dark denim jeans, a pair of sneakers, and I was in a button-down shirt. It was a panel interview, and they all showed up in suits. I was a little unprepared. I made light of the situation rather than letting it, kind of get me down in the interview. Inside, I'm thinking, oh, there's no way they're going to hire me. I just blew this just based on how I walked in here. But rather than letting that negativity take over, I just let my personality shine, my knowledge shine. And even as uncomfortable as it was, I let them know why I was the best candidate for that job. Previous, though, I had researched the job. I'd researched other laboratories that were hiring for this particular job. So I knew what the job was, and I had literally role played the interview over and over and over, highlighting those key points to make sure that I was touching those key target items that were going to be important in landing me that particular position. But it's a lot of research. And I reached out to other people on LinkedIn that had this job, because you can do a search. So I reached out to other people on LinkedIn and I said, what's it like working for this company? Or what do you do on a daily basis? What are the pros and cons of the position? What do you think someone just coming into the industry needs to be successful in this industry? Reaching out to your peers and starting that particular network of individuals, I think, is imperative to personal growth as well.
And there's a great lesson there that we talk a lot about in our course from the great teacher Stephen Covey, who says, seek first to understand before you seek to be understood. And that's what Renee just described. She wants to know, what do you need? How can I help you achieve your goal? As one great sales coach used to say, I forgot his name, Zig Ziglar, used to say, if you can help other people get what they want, you can get everything you want. And this is just good, folk stories of people in America that have gone on to achieve something and build something, but they always follow a pattern. And that pattern does not include excuses. It does not include saying, oh, well, the prison system didn't offer that. That's not going to move the needle in your life. If you focus on results and how you can make yourself better first, and then use the way that you make yourself better to improve other people's lives, incredible opportunities open. And one of the things I neglected to ask Renee about earlier was the importance of really developing strong communication skills, because she had to learn an entirely new language. When you're learning medicine and pharmacy and all, it's like an entirely new language. Just like sometimes some of the information that we provide in these courses, it's why we focus so much on vocabulary building, because in prison, you could use one word, MF. I don't want to say the word because I don't want the prisons to ban our courses, but because we know that nobody swears in prison. But prison, it effectively dumbs you down. It makes it so that you become comfortable communicating in such a way that might be appropriate for the criminal underworld. But if you want to achieve a level of success in your life and build something of meaning and relevance and dignity, you've got to learn how to communicate differently. And perhaps you could tell us a little bit, Renee, about the ways that you worked to develop your vocabulary in a professionalized science and community, and how that helped your learning and helped your self-preparations.
Of course. So it was like learning a completely different language, which was a little interesting because I would get home and I would tell, my, friends or family about everything I was learning at school, and they would just look at me like, what are you even talking about? So I started to have to realize, like, okay, this is going to help me later on, because I was still in the mindset that I was going to be a doctor. And I was like, how am I going to tell a patient that's sitting in front of me, kind of what they have, like what ailment they're facing, but also tell them in terms where they can understand and use that as a springboard moment to kind of, maybe research on their own as well. Because if you don't communicate effectively, especially to patients, they're not going to be able to understand how to be their own advocate either. And so I tried different techniques with my family because they knew nothing about what I was going to school for. So I literally tried just doing different things, saying different things, using different words, finding, what made them ask more questions, what kind of got their attention rather than them just kind of getting bored and, daydreaming as I'm trying to tell them all about my day and everything I'm learning. Like what trigger points and trigger words did I use to help draw in that engagement? And then once I got the engagement, and I wrote them down because I wrote down everything. I had my list of engagement words. And then once I started using those words, I started trying to figure out what made the conversations progress. For some people, communication comes very easily. For me, it doesn't always come very easily. I do have, a high functioning autism. And with having high functioning autism, you don't always communicate the right way. You don't always take verbal cues from people in the same way that other people do. So I really had to work hard at learning how to communicate, learning how to make eye contact, learning how to stay engaged, and learning how to make my brain think a little bit differently and act a little bit differently. So there's definitely a way to do it. But it's through trial and error, and it's through talking to your friends and having conversations, finding what works well, finding what didn't work well. Because there were some things that I said that would quite frankly make my, friends or family upset at me. And I'm like, what did I say? What just happened? And taking those goods and bads and making them into a positive and really learning how to communicate effectively, I think is crucial for success ultimately, because you're your own advocate and that just helps you.
And there are so many lessons we can learn if we're willing to listen from a master. And with Renee, what we have heard from her say throughout here is just complete investment in the self. She's focused always on developing her own skills. She lived in gratitude even when she was eating raviolis or Chef Boyardee out of a can without electricity. She could always see what she was after. And these are skills that would have helped me while I was in prison, wondering, oh my God, I still got 7 years to go or 17 years to go. How am I ever going to find my way to get into this kind of environment? That's no different of a question of how am I going to get out of the east side of El Paso and get into a role where I can become a leader. It's always this series of micro steps. It's this series of preparing ourselves. It's this series of continuous personal investment. That's what a master does. In prison, unfortunately, a lot of times the emphasis is on getting a GED. And you think, well, once I get a GED, I have achieved my education and I've gotten everything that I need. And that's great. That is certainly perfectly an accurate assessment as long as you want to live on the east side of El Paso and those kinds of environments, or if you want to go into a pathway to homelessness, or if you want to be displaced by a changing job market. But if you want to succeed and make life better for yourself, this is the time to start preparing. This is the time to start sowing seeds for what you want to become, and not to spend your time complaining and whining about what you don't have. And that's why I admire Renee so much, because she would have said, okay, from these kinds of lessons, I know what I have to do. And it doesn't have to mean for you to become a laboratory nerd, as she described herself. It might be, I want to be a landscaper, but I want to be the landscaper that owns all the lawnmowers and the shrubbers and and I want to be able to have relationships with all the corporate office parks and be able to have a team of 40 people that I might hire formerly incarcerated people to do this job, right? Those are skills that you could start working on right now. And that's critical thinking. That's developing your communication. That's learning a new vocabulary. That's learning math. These are the things that I want you to think about. And they're not from me. This is just a strategy that I learned from masters like Renee. But that's what I'm hearing from her. I hope that you're hearing that from her as well. Renee, so you get in this role. Tell us how things start to change for you when you're working in this capacity of a laboratory and employing people and getting sales and so on.
Yeah. So from when I was at the job that I was at when I left college, I decided, and I kind of set early on, I saw what they were doing. I saw how they were growing because they were a very new company at the time. And I thought, you know what, with my background, I can start my own company. I can do this. I need help on the business side because I didn't know anything about business. I didn't know at the time how to even start a business. I didn't even know how to file LLC paperwork with the Corporations Commission. I knew none of that. But what I did know is that on the technical side, I could 100% start a lab and get going on the right way. So I started approaching people that I worked with at this particular laboratory and found an individual that was like, yeah, you know what? Let's do this. I have the business side. I'm like, great. We are a great pair. And so we ended up starting our own laboratory, and it was not always fantastic. The first, year and a half, 2 years, it was so rough. But, there's a couple times where I thought that we were complete failures and that this wasn't going to work. And then I also had to get myself out of that mindset, and I had to not give it to the negativity. And I literally had like my goals, and I'm like, this is what we need to do. If we do this, it will work. It won't fail. And so once, and then you're always going to fail. With any success comes failure. It's just going to happen. Things are going to work. Things are not going to work.
It's a series of, I think they say 2 steps forward, 1 step back. That's what life is really all about. But you were, just so that I'm clear for our audience, you were one of the early people in this laboratory, but you were not a founder. Is that right?
At that particular laboratory, yes.
And I'm curious if there's more laboratories. So continue with your career, because there is some backstory here that I want to fill in for our audience, and that is, starting a venture and raising money and building a business and creating something out of an idea. But before I get to that part, I'd like to hear the rest of your career. So you're in that role. How does your life on a personal level change when you go into it, like financially?
It was amazing. So I started off as customer service for this laboratory. I worked my butt off. Well, I don't know if I can say that. I worked my tail off, and I really, really made myself be known. And I was active on calls. We would have regional calls every week. I would ask questions. I would prepare for those calls where it seemed like other people wouldn't prepare. They would just log into the call and just go with the flow. I was asking questions. I was submitting ideas. I was, saying, this is what's happening in my territory. What are you guys seeing? Like really trying to engage and get my name out there. When I would talk on the call, I would always say my name. I'd be like, oh, this is Renee. And then I would say my question just because I wanted people to start, knowing my name with, the Arizona territory and New Mexico territory and whatnot. So that was a little, that was a little bit of a tougher time because I was trying to, get into different positions as the company grew. I was promoted to sales and then regional sales, which was fantastic. I mean, once I was promoted to sales and I was making commissions, I was doing so well. My daughter and I bought our first house. I say my daughter and I, but I bought our first house, I guess, for us. And
so no more eating cold Chef Boyardee.
No, not intentionally. I think we still do that occasionally just to make sure we're not losing our roots.
But give us an idea of like even earnings. Like I like to give people hope. So when you were at one stage, you're probably at the Walgreens stage, you're probably earning the equivalent or pretty close to minimum wage.
It was about $10 an hour at Walgreens.
And then it goes to now you get to the higher levels. What does that change to?
So with my commissions, once I was a sales rep, I was making probably about $300,000 to $400,000 a year.
So for those of you who aren't as quick with math, $10 an hour, figured you work $2,000 a year, is about $20,000 a year. But when you invest in yourself and you develop a position of leadership and growth and contribution, and people can see, wow, you're really contributing to the growth of this company, you're now earning 10, 15 times that. And it changes not only your life, but it results in sometimes intergenerational changes for the better. That, as she said, well, it might not be better or worse, but more opportunities open when you put yourself in the pathway for more opportunities. And I'm sure that's something that I recognized when I was in prison. If I got an education, I would see opportunities that other people didn't see. And because I could see them, I could build more. And it's what led to a big influence in my life in prison, and certainly a big influence in my life when I came home from prisons. But it's the decisions that you make inside of a prison that influence what you become. And that's for the good or for the bad. If you focus on controlling the TV and hanging around and being a shot caller, well, you've got to own what comes with that. And what comes with that frequently for too many people is more problems with the law, unemployment, underemployment, homelessness, many challenges. In our masterclass, we try to show you a different outcome. And that's why I'm so grateful to you, Renee. And so your career continues to grow. What else am I missing about the growth of this inspiring journey?
I ended up, once we decided that we were going to start our own lab, we had to obviously wait out our non-competes, and we did things the right way. So we resigned our positions, and then, for my business partner, it was a little bit of a struggle because she was always used to, coming from an affluent family. I didn't really struggle, for 2 years with no income because I'm like, well, I saved money, I did the right things, and, we were good. Plus our background, we could live off not very much. And then, once we started our own company, we hit the ground running. I mean, it was fantastic. We ended up employing over 100 people. Some of those people we found on LinkedIn. There were others that were referrals from other people, but we had something that we were able to give back and finally be proud of. And some of the people that we hired might not have had the best backgrounds. Some people, there were some people that had been to prison previously. One of our sales reps did not have a fantastic background, but you know what? He came to that interview prepared, and his attitude just blew everybody out of the water. It didn't matter what his background was. It mattered what he wanted to do and how he wanted to better himself. And, he ended up being one of our best sales reps.
What did he earn?
Oh my gosh, more than me, to be honest with you. He was probably a little over $1 million a year.
You see what I'm saying to people is I want you to see you might be living in a crisis right now, and you might be told, oh, you can't do this or you can't do that if you're in prison. But one thing, if you can do, if you have the right attitude and the right skills, you can't just have the right attitude. You can't just be there full of smiles and happy talk. You've got to be able to deliver. But what does it take to be successful in sales? Be able to communicate with people, be able to bridge that gap, be able to open conversations, be able to take words and turn them into sentences and paragraphs. And that's a skill anyone can develop, even in prison. And it's one of the reasons I try to bring these kinds of stories onto you, because it's not a fantasy to be talking about making $200,000, $300,000, $400,000, $1 million a year, as long as you have invested in yourself. It doesn't come from just getting a job. It comes from delivering. That guy made that money because he brought sales in, right?
Oh, and he worked hard. I mean, he was always the first one that I would hear from in the mornings, and that I would hear from him for questions throughout the whole day. We didn't even make our sales reps send us, who they were seeing, their prospects. He would automatically just send it. He'd be like, this, almost to hold himself accountable to what his goals were. He would send it to us and say, this is what I'm achieving this week. This is what I'm going to hit. Some of those goals he sent in, I'm like, oh, that's a pretty, stretch goal. And I think in a couple of years, there was only one time that he didn't actually hit that goal. And it was because his wife was ill and whatnot. So we had to focus on a couple of different things. But, it was amazing what he was able to accomplish, and all of our sales reps were able to accomplish. And not only that, but the people inside the lab as support, we really set up a team type of environment to help everybody succeed. It wasn't just, sales. It was the entire company knew who each other were. And we really set up clear communication between everybody to really help propel the whole company to the next level. That's really important. The communication that you're talking about is imperative for success.
It's communication. It's also critical thinking. It's also discipline. It's also commitment. Renee, I can't thank you enough for sharing your inspiring story with our audience. It will really go a long ways. There will be certainly more than 300,000 people that get the privilege of learning from you. But we want you in the audience to understand it's not just listening to an inspiring story. You'll notice that there is a very extensive coursework that Renee has worked with us on in building. And in that coursework, we're trying to show you what can you do today, regardless of what the system does. What steps can you take today to change your life? And that is why I asked her to volunteer with us, is because she is the epitome of somebody who didn't make complaints and cry about what was going on in her life. She's somebody who said, I have to invest in myself. And we heard that throughout her story. From 12 years old, I want to change my life and take care of my family. From high school, becoming a good student, community college, starting with one group, then making a commitment to her father and saying, I'm going to go after medical school, recognizing her daughter's more important than medical school, and then focuses on a series of incrementally gradual improvements in her career and her prospects for success. And then using social media to let the world know who she is. All of this are direct relationships to what we teach in our course. Define success, set goals, have the right attitude, as we heard not only that she has, but other people she's observed, aspire to something more, take action, make sure that you hold yourself accountable, make sure that you keep your head in the game and you're aware of opportunities and make the world aware of you. 8, be authentic. make sure that that you're for real, that you've got your own plan together. And remember the difference, what she just said about the difference between her and her partner. She was able to live without and make that sacrifice because she saved and she knew that she had a vision for something bigger. 9, you've got to celebrate these little achievements. And 10, you always live in gratitude for the blessings that come your way. And I don't think I've ever heard anybody express that more eloquently than Renee when she said, hey, my daughter and I could live in poverty or live on the margins even without electricity and laugh and have a good time eating our cans of Chef Boyardee. I mean, these are real life examples of people who have become successful because they live according to those same principles. I'd love to say that I created those principles, but I didn't. I learned them from masters like Renee. Renee, we've kind of come to the end of our lesson here, and I might want to ask you if you have anything that you'd like to leave our audience with, any final words of wisdom that you might be able to share with people who are living in struggle and trying to figure out how they're going to come out of here successfully.
You are your own best advocate. You are the one that's going to be able to, make your life whatever you would like it to be. It just is going to take work and kind of learning how to get yourself to where you want to be and organize your life and go out there and get it, because it's possible.
And I really appreciate you, especially for telling us about that inspiring fella who's formerly incarcerated that has gone on to become insanely successful in his career. This time in prison doesn't have to be the end. It could be the seed for a new start. But you've got to be able to document your story, and we hope that you will do that on the Prison Professor's Talent Profile so that we could show you and profile you as the CEO of your own life. That's the way we're going to bring these changes to the criminal justice system, and we couldn't do it without people like Renee. So, Renee, I just want to thank you so much for being a part of our community. You are now a prison professor.
Awesome.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.